The guest I have today is nothing short of extraordinary. He's a prominent, provocative Democratic intellectual, a professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard University, and holds the title of Professor Emeritus at Princeton University. He also taught at Union Theological Seminary, Yale, Harvard, and the University of Paris. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard in 3 years, obtained his MA and PhD in philosophy at Princeton. He's written 20 books and has edited 13. He's best known for his classics, Race Matters and Democracy Matters, and for his memoir, Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud. His most recent book, Black Prophetic Fire, offers an unflinching look at 19th and 20th century African-American leaders and their visionary legacies. Ladies and gentlemen, you already guessed it by now, I'm sure. My guest today, Dr. Cornel West. Thank you, Mr. West, for being here.
My brother, I'm just so blessed to be in conversation with you. I want to salute you. You are a force for good in a mighty way, my brother. You remind me of William Monroe Trotter, that great black radical, died in 1934. Professor Cary Greenwich has written his magisterial biography called The Black Radical, or just Black Radical, The Life and Times of William Monroe Trotter. But you remind me of him so much, man, cutting against the grain, telling the truth, seeking justice, willing to get in trouble, be in the middle of controversy, but always grounded in quest for truth and justice. Man, there's very few like that these days of any color, let alone chocolate, let alone black, and still smiling, my brother. So I salute you, man.
Well, Dr. Cornel West, that is such a... Wow, that's such a, I'm at a loss for words for the way, the humbling that I feel from you expressing that appreciation, man. Sir, you know, it goes without speaking, man, that you are a force for good yourself, brother, and that is the highest order of props I could ever get. But I would like to jump right into this, sir, because I just got this morning. The New York Board of Elections removed Bernie's name from the ballot, and it canceled this 2020 Democratic primary. What's your reaction to this latest news? And is this not a long line of disappointments for Bernie supporters and those teetering on the edge of losing all their belief in the democratic process?
Well, the thing is, my brother, is that we got to understand this against the backdrop of the decaying and deterioration in the American empire and the ways in which neo-fascist sensibilities and neo-fascist practices are becoming more and more prevalent. And to cancel that primary, you can imagine what's going on in the mind of the neo-fascist gangster in the White House. He's thinking, well, they could cancel that. We can cancel the election in November. And again, anytime you think of the larger context, and this is so important, this larger context in which neo-fascist forces intensify as the empire decays, as the wealth inequalities, the raw realities of suffering become more visible, and people feel as if there's no progressive way out. There's no left vision. There's no left analysis made available to the people. And so I think this is a very ominous and a dangerous fact. I hadn't really heard of that, but I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, though, brother. We're living in such grim and bleak times, though, man.
Yeah, government.
But always keep track of big money, Wall Street, big military, Pentagon, State Department in the background, because for them, you know, this is not a big matter. As long as their profits are made, as long as they're reproducing their power and their status, then they would go with a Trump or they would go with a milquetoast neoliberal like Biden. And it's the working people, it's poor people who suffer, who have to deal with the disproportionate amount of misery, like under this coronavirus lockdown. But it was already catastrophic before the coronavirus even hit in terms of the lives of poor working people in this decaying empire, my brother.
Wow. And, you know, I totally agree with that, sir. And I want to talk about that pandemic, and especially how it impacts poor, most vulnerable people, as I'm sure you're aware of, that you speak so much about. You and Reverend Barber have spoken about it from the poor people's movement. But I got a question I have to ask you sure. To me, sir, my position of being a Bernie supporter for all this time puts me in a precarious position. And a lot of people are calling Bernie Sanders a sellout. They look at him suspending his campaign at this time. Very bluntly, sir, what is your response to that? What would you say to those who say Bernie caved on us, he gave up on us, and he's a sellout, he's a coward?
I mean, one is that you tell anybody that you support a political candidate because you're pursuing truth and justice, and that candidate seems to be the best relative to other candidates. But, I mean, I come out of a revolutionary Christian tradition. I try to wear all these politicians like a loose garment, brother. That is to say, they are the best relative to what's out there at the moment. And there's no doubt that Brother Bernie, he's my dear, dear brother. I have deep love and respect for the brother. But it doesn't mean I agree with everything, and I can criticize him as I did in 2016 or as I would now on a number of different issues. But nobody ties up. You see, Tim Black is a free black man. Cornel West is a free black man. Nobody ties us to candidates. This is our quest for truth and justice, trying to keep track of the weak and the vulnerable. It's beginning on the chocolate side of town, and he represented the best of our black freedom legacy, the best of our black tradition of struggle for honor and democracy. And so whatever decisions he makes is his decision. Now, they could say he's selling out and so forth and so on, but you'd have to look at what his arguments are and what have you. I mean, if, in fact, he begins to say what our dear brother John Lewis said. I have deep love for John Lewis. You know that. He's one of the great freedom writers of the 1960s. But when he comes out and says Joe Biden is a man of courage, a man of conscience, will make a great president, you say, quit lying, Brother John. Don't lie to the people. Respect the people. Now, if Bernie Sanders comes out and says something like that, then he's gone too far. He's starting to lie. You can't be against the lies of the neo-fascist gangster in the White House and then end up lying for a milquetoast neoliberal tied to Wall Street and tied to big military. If, for example, Brother Bernie says that given the options at present, that Biden is the better candidate, even given the fact that he's still my political foe, given the fact that he's on the other side of the class war that's coming at poor and working people, given the fact that he's captured by Wall Street, captured by military-industrial complex, and that's a different kind of matter. Because truth and justice is always bigger than any individual, bigger than any candidate, and bigger than any one of us in that way. So that I would want there to be some serious conversation and dialogue about why people do what they do. But once folks just start lying and rationalizing their choices, then I begin to move to the language of sellout. So I wouldn't use the language of sellout for Brother Bernie because I don't see him running around lying about Biden or lying about the situation. This is the best that he can do relative to the campaign that he ran and trying to be true to his concern of working people, Medicare for all, ... But you see the point that I'm trying to make, my brother?
I do see the point, and I heard you make that point as well on the Michael Moore podcast, where you explained why maybe some reasons why Bernie didn't feel comfortable going after Joe Biden in certain instances, because he was so tied to Obama. To go after Joe Biden, recklessly or even adamantly on some issues would pit him against the black community, who still has such a reverence for Barack Obama, even regardless of what he did for Wall Street. So I don't think many people heard that point, but if you could make that once again, just for my audience to hear, of how black people are connected to Obama, which put Bernie in a bad position to begin with.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think you said it with eloquence, though, brother. You said it very clearly that from the very beginning, Brother Bernie could not allow Sister Nina Turner or myself to say fully what we wanted to say about Barack Obama and his neoliberal legacy and his ties to militarism, his ties to Wall Street domination and so forth. Why? Because he got 94% popularity rating in the Democratic Party, and he's got even higher in the black community. So any critique of Barack Obama seemingly would be viewed as an attack on the black community, or would be viewed somehow as not allowing Bernie's project and his proposals to be heard clearly in the black community. So like people like yourself and myself and Sister Maria and a whole host of other black folk who have been very vocal in their defense of truth and justice as it connects to the Bernie Sanders campaign, we were in a tough situation. And you can imagine how difficult it was for me. Now, if somebody asked me a question about Brother Barack Obama, I'm going to say what's on my mind. No doubt about that.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to talk about war crimes with drones because I love my brothers and sisters in Libya. I love my brothers and sisters in Yemen and Pakistan and so forth. I'm going to say something about his relation to Larry Summers and Tim Guyton. You see, Summers is back now as a major advisor for the Biden campaign.
Yes. So that's
bringing him back again, repealing the Glass-Steagall, unleashing Wall Street greed, bringing him back again, allowing Wall Street criminals and gangsters who engaged in insider trading, market manipulation, fraudulent activity, predatory lending, especially the poor people, disproportionately black. These are the folks that Biden's bringing in. And you say, oh, my God, deja vu again, the same old neoliberals who haven't learned their lessons, it seems. Now, it could be that Brother Summers learns his lessons and surprises me. That's fine. I'm open. I'll try to be flexible. But when you see this kind of knee-jerk reaction, bringing in neoliberal elites on the one hand and keeping the same counter-terrorist teams from the past when it comes to State Department and Pentagon choices, you say, oh, so we got a neoliberal disaster against the neo-fascist catastrophe. Here we go again.
In light of that, Dr. West, when people say, well, look, we have Biden, we have Trump, it becomes harder and harder for me to even consider Joe Biden as being a better solution when you look at him, and then he's trying to pull Bernie supporters into the fold, but he's not giving us anything to embrace in his candidacy, in his campaign, as you just pointed out, putting these Wall Street birds, the ones who raped us in 2008, 9, and 7, back on the team.
No, it's true. It's true. But keep in mind, though, brother, that we're not really looking for the solution within the arena of electoral politics in a highly financialized capitalist economy, a highly militarized nation state, and that's its connection to mass incarceration is something that happens on the domestic front in the same way the drones go out in terms of its imperial policy, but in the commodified culture too. How do you gain a foothold for truth and justice in a commodified culture, the militarized nation state, driven very much by white supremacist sensibilities, white supremacist practices, white supremacist perceptions, but then a financialized capitalist economy, meaning that financial services sit at the center with over 40% of the profits gained by those financial folk in financial services and intimate relations to Silicon Valley with the technologically advanced monopolies and oligopolies that we know, Microsoft and the Google and Facebook and what have you, so that Biden would never come near solution. I mean, my wrestling with this issue has to do with we've got to be part of an anti-fascist coalition. You see, Trump is anti-fascist in a very, very vicious way. And it's not that he's so much ideologically driven. He's narcissistic, that he doesn't think at all. You know, he's below mediocre. You know, he's driven by a certain kind of vanity and stupidity. And this is very dangerous. I think Noam Chomsky is absolutely right about this in terms of his finger on the nuclear button and his unconcerns of ecological catastrophe and so forth. But it's the Republican Party behind him, of course, that keeps him going. And so, I mean, my own position about this is that if we had a strong third-party candidate or a strong possibility of creating a left-wing culture that could educate the people and go against both, because you see, Biden is the neoliberal wing of the ruling class. Trump is the neo-fascist wing of the ruling class. But they both tied to the same bird. And so Biden is not a comrade. He's not a friend of poor people. He's not a friend of working people. He's the architect of the largest prison system in the history of the whole world, the history of the modern world. 5% of the population of America, 25% of the prisoners, and we 50% with our brown brothers and sisters. Biden's an architect of that. He bragged about that just a few years ago. He invaded and occupied Iraq. Over 500,000 precious brothers and sisters in Iraq killed. No serious reflection on those consequences. And we can go on and on. Privatizing education, he supports. So what do we do? What do we do as black people? What do we do as people who want to keep alive the legacy of the Martin Kings and the Ella Bakers and the Fannie Lou Hamers and others, you see?
Yeah.
And so in that regard, I don't look for any one of these as a solution. Now, that doesn't mean that I might be forced, if I were in Ohio or Florida, where my vote really, really matters. If I were pushed against a wall, I would be forced to vote for a political foe like Biden. But he's on the other side of the class war coming at us. He's on the other side of the prison-industrial complex, which is the kind of racialized war coming at us, you see. So we're between a rock and a hard place. You understand the dilemma I'm trying to
Absolutely.
express here, my brother.
Yes, you painted that picture very clearly, and I'm living it, and I have these people that are very passionate about changing the political movement, a change movement, a real movement, and we say, well, is this Bernie Sanders movement? Is it over? And if it's not over, what do we do to keep it alive? And if it's not driven by the code of personality, one person, if it's really a movement about principles, what do we need to do now to make sure those principles stay intact and we move forward with or without Bernie, as it seems we must?
Well, one thing to keep in mind, my dear brother, this is where we learn from the musicians now. You know what I mean? That
Come back.
Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Mary Lou Williams, they would call the group after their name, but they would never say that they are at the core, the center of it. Without their other musicians involved in improvisation and collective expression and antagonistic cooperation, there's no such thing as a Mary Lou Williams orchestra or Duke Ellington band. So that the people's movement and the black freedom movement is never the ownership or possession of one individual. The Bernie Sanders campaign was the best progressive campaign for those of us who fundamentally committed to poor people and working people, fighting white supremacy, fighting various forms of police brutality, fighting the decrepit schools, fighting indecent housing, fighting the massive unemployment and so forth, fighting the self-hatred, and making sure that black people, working people, are at the center of a vision. That's the best campaign for that particular moment. That campaign is now over. The movement goes on. The struggle goes on. You see what I mean?
I do see what you mean. I hope that we will be able to push that message out so people can understand it. Because we know people, honestly, Dr. West, they are reeling. They're still going through. Someone wrote me last night and said, Tim, we understand you're going through the grieving process, brother, but, you need to accept it. And Dr. Cornel West, and they used your name. They invoked your name. They said Dr. Cornel West was on Michael Brooks' podcast, and he said that Bernie lacked the courage to give up his position of power instead of moving forward and challenging Joe Biden. And I just replied to him that I am still who I am, and I still believe in what I believe. And until you have a better movement, this is the movement I'm riding with.
Well, the thing is, I don't think I made the claim that Brother Bernie lacked the courage. I said that he makes a judgment based on the options available to him. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? That doesn't make him cowardly. It just makes him making his choices. But he also makes the choices as someone who is working with the neoliberal wing of the ruling class as an independent. He's a politician. I'm not a politician.
Right.
You see, that's not my calling. His calling to be a politician. Yeah. And he's still my brother. I love the brother. And I was glad to be with him for 5 years. You see what I mean? But there's a variety of ways in which we pursue truth and justice connected to movements, forms of motion as they relate to campaigns. And campaigns are not movements in any sense of them being identical. Not at all. Campaigns are vehicles through which movements move in order to make sure certain kinds of issues are raised. So when Medicare for All came, yes, Brother Bernie's on that bandwagon. I'm on that bandwagon. Brother Tim Black's on that bandwagon. We moving. You see what I mean?
I do. Speaking of movement,
so when it comes to Israeli occupation, for example, and we pushing Bernie on this, we disagreed. When it comes to boycott and divestment and sanctions, I'm for the boycott movement. Bernie's against it. He's still my brother. I just think he's wrong. He thinks I'm wrong. No, I'm in solidarity with my precious Palestinian brothers and sisters, and I don't have to worry about what people think of the Democratic Party.
Free black man.
They can kiss my so-and-so.
Right. and I agree with you, and I support the BDS movement as well for the same reasons, and I feel exactly like you. And that's part of my thing, Dr. West.
And that's part of the thing. Our dear brother Bernie, he doesn't support it. He says, well, why you single out Israel? We say because the U.S. government singles them out and shows that their support. We support Kashmir. We support the Tibet. We support various other folks struggling against occupation too. But we live in the American empire. Our money is going there.
Yes.
And it's so that we have to find some way, especially a nonviolent way, of resisting the vicious Israeli occupation. And in no way makes us anti-Semitic. And Bernie was afraid of that charge. But he did move further than any other elected official. You don't see any black politicians telling the truth about the Israeli-Palestinian situation. They scared. Most of them conformists, and a lot of them just sellouts and cowards.
That's why I have a problem. Now, earlier, Dr. West, you stated how you have this deep respect for Representative John Lewis. And just this weekend, I got in an argument because when he endorsed, as you stated, when he endorsed Joe Biden, they had that sweeping rhetoric. They used the backdrop of a civil rights movement to prop up someone who I don't think whose name should even be mentioned alongside MLK. Nonetheless, have his image on the screen as he's promoting Joe Biden. So I can't separate that slap in the face from John Lewis from what he did 60 years ago. I mean, I do separate it, and I say I can't respect it.
They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand, no, brother. That is to say that people go through stages in their life. You know what I mean? As a young brother, he was courageous. He was visionary. He was willing to die. I will never, ever forget that. You will never forget that. But he's at a different stage now, and he's been at this neoliberal stage for a long time. You know that. I remember way back in 2008, he was still tied to Hillary over against Obama even. But so that I think we want to make clear that we want to tell the truth about people because we respect the people we're speaking to on your show, and we respect John Lewis. So John Lewis, when he was out in the streets, when he was with SNCC, when he was telling the truth, his speech had to be revised by the Kennedy administration during the March on Washington because it was too radical. That's the John Lewis I like. That's the John Lewis I connect with. The John Lewis now, and I'm praying for him because I love the brother and I don't want the cancer to get him. I don't want the cancer to mess with him. I'm praying for him. But he's lying. He's not telling the truth about Joe Biden. I mean, the same is true with my dear brother Michael Eric Dyson. You know, you saw when he came out talking about Joe Biden was a great advocate for the downtrodden. Quit lying, brother Mike. Use your rhetorical genius in such a way that you serve in poor and working people. Quit adjusting and accommodating yourself to a ugly neoliberal status quo where you benefit and you can become more highly visible and allow your sellout status to become something that allows you to cash in. You just got to tell the truth about people.
He did the same thing for Hillary Clinton back in 2008, as you stated. Same identity.
Absolutely.
He came out in 2016. He was doing the same thing for Hillary Clinton. He got up there and said Hillary Clinton has the possibility of being the most transformative vehicle ever in the black community, re-advancing and enhancing the black. You know how he does, and I'm looking at him like I used to have so much respect for Michael.
No, he's sold out so many times so long ago, and it's a sad thing because he's got such tremendous talent and skills. But it's a human choice that people make. You know what I mean? It's a choice that people make, and they have to be accountable for it. That doesn't mean they're less human than anybody else. They just have to be accountable for it. That's all.
Now, we spoke about Obama and his grip on the black community. One of the struggles that I have, and I'm hoping that you have suggestions for how I tell the truth about Brother Barack, and I still somehow allow these people to keep their pride. I remember telling my wife when I broke the news, when I found it took 2 years for my wife to truly embrace the neoliberalism of Obama, how he bailed out the banks, didn't bail out the people. No, he did have a House and the Senate for 2 years, and what did he do with it as pertaining to black folks? And she wept, Dr. West. She wept when she finally accepted that this person who she revered, who she thought she'd never see happen, a black president, what he had done. So how do we? I got to thread the needle, Dr. West, because if I just come at Obama, as you know, my black audience will disappear. How do we do? How do I do that? How do you do it? I don't think you do it at all. I think you just tell the truth.
Well, no, one is that I try to be very honest and candid in terms of who anybody is, who John Lewis is, who Barack Obama is. Barack Obama will forever be the symbolic figure who, in an unprecedented way, broke the glass ceiling and made his way to the White House. Now, from my analysis, that means he becomes the brilliant black face of the American empire. But from another set of lens, which is mainly the majority of black folk, it is the highly successful black man who's able to deal with white supremacy coming at him and still succeeds. Well, I understand that. That's why I had a critical support for him. Fox News ain't no joke. Ku Klux Klan ain't no joke. The Democratic Party, the Clintonites in the Democratic Party against Barack Obama, that was no joke. He had tremendous odds coming against him, and he succeeded. And we must applaud that to the degree to which black triumph over any forms of white supremacy or black achievement over any forms of hatred and contempt are worthy of a certain kind of applause. But I ain't going into no long-standing ovation. It's an applause because it's a symbolic indictment of white supremacy. Now the question is, what substance will follow therefrom? Will he be true to the people who sacrificed for him for 400 years when the first slave got off of that slave ship and walked into that slave auction? Will he be true to Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells Barnett? Will he be true to Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and A. Philip Randolph and Martin King and Malcolm and your grandmother and my grandmother? Will he be true to all of that suffering, blood, sweat, and tears? Or will he get up there and begin to conform to the very same status quo that's been doing us in? So when he brought in the Wall Street people, I went at him tooth and nail.
Yes, you did.
When he extended the surveillance, when he extended the security, when he assassinated American citizens without due trial, that is fascism, brother. You can't just kill people because you disagree with it. If that were the case, we'd been killing a whole lot of white folk in the Klan, too. We didn't do that. People need a trial before they get killed. You don't just kill folk because you're the president and get away with it. 3 American citizens that happened. Nobody said a mumbling word. Black press won't say nothing. MSNBC definitely not going to say nothing. That was all neoliberal propaganda for Obama every day. Very much like you get the propaganda right now, the right wing of Fox News supporting the neo-fascist gangster. CNN didn't want to touch certain taboo issues like drones. Didn't want to go into an investigation of Wall Street or why Eric Holder black attorney general coming out of Covington burlesque on Wall Street wouldn't want to examine closely some of his close friends when they engage in gangster activity, but can go to Ferguson and call the black brothers knuckleheads and so and so. So quickly. You see what I mean? I don't like that kind of double standard. You see, I'm a Christian. I look at the world through the lens of the cross, not through the lens of Pontius Pilate's office. That's a spiritual issue. That's a moral issue. That's what kept black people going, trying to be tied to truth and justice rather than just conveniently adjusting to power. And that's the last thing we need right now as this empire decays, because if we without the truth telling and the witness bearing and vision, somewhere I read, where there is no vision, the people perish. We haven't had significant vision for a while. We've had spectacle, we've had celebrity, but we haven't had vision. Being faithful to life and faithful unto death. That's the only thing that's kept the black freedom movement going. Thank God for our musicians, brother. Because they always come in. You remember when Henry Highland Garnett said in 1837, he said, black people, never confuse your situation with that of the Israelites of the Old Testament, for Pharaoh is on both sides of the bloody Red Sea. That's Henry Highland Garnett standing with one leg. So what happens when you got Pharaoh on both sides? Somebody sing a song. Here come Ma Rainey. Here come Luther Vandross. Here come Donny Hathaway. Here come John Coltrane. Here come Aretha. Somebody sing a song. I can imagine when your precious wife was breaking down in tears and she could see the hypocrisy that had been blinding so many people. She probably need a little Anita Baker right there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You're going to need a little Jerry Allen on the piano right there to get your spirits back in place. But she bounced back, you bounced back, I bounced back, and we're going to be swinging like Ella Fitzgerald. We're going to swing like Muhammad Ali until the worms get our body, brother. To be true to all the love that went into the shaping of who we are, we were not meant to simply be folk up for sale.
Identity politics is another major issue. It's something I have a problem expressing how detrimental it is, but also I try to do it on the backdrop that diversity is good. Like some of my white progressive friends, they take it too far, as if any mention of race is now racism. Diversity is needed. We need a multinational, multicultural movement, and too often, very few. Like if you start naming the black commentators, the black progressive media entities that are the independent, you run the list is short. I mean, you've been on programs, you know this. So how do we press the issue, Dr. West, that identity politics bad, diversity good, and what the Democratic Party does is a feature, not a bug, when they use that politics in order to make us embrace what's bad for us and push away what's good?
Well, I mean, part of it is that the neoliberal strategy is to talk about black faces in high places, and you see this in Kianga, Sister Kianga's magnificent text.
Yes. I heard recently on Democracy Now! Where they were discussing race. I think Dyson was on there with her, and she bested him, obviously, but it was very interesting.
Oh, no. I think her last name was Taylor, though.
Yes. She has three names. Yeah, she has three names. Right.
I'm sorry, but we want to make sure that people get a chance to know her work. She's already one of the most important black intellectuals wrestling with these issues. But Sister Taylor, she wrote a piece called "The Black Plague" in the New York about a week or so ago, which is probably the best thing we have, trying to come to terms with coronavirus and its relation to the other kinds of virus, the virus of white supremacy, the virus of predatory capitalism, the virus of male supremacy, and so forth. So I'm sorry about overlooking my dear sister's name, Professor Taylor. She's distinguished.
Oh, I'll put it on the screen, Dr. West.
But I mention that because she makes the point, and she's absolutely right about this, that identity politics is a form of class politics. And Adolph Reed makes this point too. So the question becomes, what kinds of class politics are we talking about? If we have representation inclusion and diversity to make the class hierarchy more colorful, to make the imperial hierarchy more colorful. We're not attacking the system. We're just providing decoration inside the system so the system hides and conceals the suffering of our poor black brothers and sisters, our working class black brothers and sisters, and other poor and working class brothers and sisters. You and I know, my brother, that when it comes to the mass incarceration regime, we got Michelle Alexander, you got Elizabeth Hinton writing their powerful text on understanding mass incarceration. That when it comes to the mass incarceration, you and I know, if black middle class kids, as precious as they are, had been going to jail or were going to jail now at the same level and intensity as precious black poor and working class kids, we'd have different kind of black leadership. We have different kind of black church. We have different kind of black civic association. Because when the Jack and Jill kids go to jail, the same level as precious Jamal and Letitia on the corner, then you got a different kind of concern. Well, we've got to say that Jamal and Letitia have exactly the same value as our Jack and Jill brothers and sisters. That's a moral, spiritual way of being in the world. That's what separated King from other black middle class folks. He kept his arm's length on the cowardliness and callousness of the black bourgeoisie at its worst. And he became part of the black bourgeoisie at its best. Du Bois was the same way. Paul Robeson was the same way. Harry Belafonte the same way. We can go on and on and on in this regard. Dorothy Irene Height. I'm a member of Delta, but we must always lift as we climb. Don't just climb by yourself and want to be a spectacle at the top. Everybody see how smart and rich you are. How are your cousins doing? How are you linked to them in such a way that as you climb, they also are going up as you tell the truth? And see, I've been very critical, as you know, almost like E. Franklin Frazier and black bourgeoisie, of the worst of the black bourgeoisie, because every bourgeoisie in a capitalist society is usually narrow-minded, blind, selfish, narcissistic, and you have to get class distance and sometimes commit class suicide in order to be involved in the quest for truth and justice. That's why when I started off talking about you and William Monroe Trotter, that brother's a Harvard graduate, friend of Du Bois, editor of The Guardian. He was faithful unto death in his quest for truth and justice, focusing on poor people. So he ended up spending time with socialists. He ended up spending time with communists, African Blood Brotherhood. He ended up spending, A. Philip Randolph and Chauncey Owens had to go to his house and stay in his basement when the FBI was coming at him. Wasn't the FBI then, but was the earlier version of the FBI, same J. Edgar Hoover, chasing them that would have COINTELPRO against Martin and A. Brett Brown and Stokely Carmichael and the other black, Mumia Abu-Jamal and the other black fighters of the last few decades, you see. So that Trotter becomes somebody who is an example for us. And then, of course, with Malcolm, I'd worry about his critique of the black bourgeoisie because he coming from the street. And he's coming at him tooth and nail. And yet he still got something to learn from everybody, as he did. God bless his witness. Muslim brother, revolutionary Muslim. The way I try to be in my own very, very inadequate way. A revolutionary Christian. He was deeply religious like myself.
You know, the coronavirus, the COVID-19, is disproportionately impacting poor people. And since black people are mostly the poor people, predominantly the poor people in the United States, is predominantly affecting us. Did this give us a moment to show the world, those who did not know, the disparities that are the blatant disparities in health, education, environmental justice, racial justice, what we've been dealing with all this time? Given the numbers don't lie. It shows you. Detroit, anywhere there's an epicenter of black folks, poor black folks, you got a higher concentration of death in the corona. So can we take this and make this an opportunity? And how would we do that, Dr. West?
Well, I mean, one is I learned from my dear brother Jamu Baraka of the Black Alliance for Peace, or Brother Glenn Ford, Sister Margaret Wimberly of Black Agenda Report, that we shouldn't be surprised at all. We know that the way white supremacy operates in a capitalist society, that there's going to be disproportionate amount of death and suffering and misery in black communities. Also indigenous peoples, that they have very high rates as well, and then brown and yellow, and then on to our white brothers and sisters. So that we shouldn't be surprised. The question is, how do we fortify ourselves in these disparities? I mean, you got the Center for Disease Control, didn't even keep these statistics. It wasn't for what was going on in Milwaukee when it first came out. 26% of the population, over 75, 80% of the deaths. What the heck is going on? Well, let's see Chicago. Wow, Chicago, 15% of black folk in the state, and almost 60% of those dying. What is going on? Well, it has to do with the fact that we are more physically sick than anybody else other than indigenous people in this society. So if the virus is going to affect those who are already compromised with their immune system, with diabetes and asthma and so forth and so on, then it's going to affect us disproportionately. Absolutely right. And that's what we see. And so we witness clearly the empire declining, decaying, people losing their jobs, don't have insurance to fall back, getting a little $1,200 when the banks are getting billions of dollars. I mean, what war priority that people still want to put big money over the lives of everyday people? The democracy is being revealed for the sham that it has already been. The inequality is being disclosed for what it really is. But the question becomes, how do we fortify ourselves to fight? I mean, we got the new text now by our dear brother Frank Wilderson on Afro-pessimism, and he's a very important voice and an indispensable perspective. But the bottom line of Afro-pessimism is not tell us how bad things are for black people. We already know that.
Right.
We need an analysis of power, and the bottom line is, how you gonna fight?
Hopefully,
how you gonna fight?
Yeah. Hopefully with allies. Allies. We need the numbers, and that's why I'm always befuddled, man, as Dr. West, why, I'm trying to bring together multiple cultures. Like, that my show is a melting pot. I try to bring everybody in because we can't do it by ourselves in silos, Dr. West.
Absolutely, because the thing is, my dear brother, anytime you're talking about a quest for truth and justice, you're not talking about skin pigmentation.
Nope.
You see, if somebody wants to fight slavery, John Brown gonna show up. If somebody wants to, you see, and he don't ask for nobody's permission. He shows up with his sons. You see, and William Lloyd Garrison gonna show up. And Lydia Maria Child, white sister, she gonna show up. We fighting apartheid in America, Jim Crow, Jane Crow. Well, you're going to have some white and brown and yellow folk who show up because they want to be persons of integrity and honesty and decency and want to pursue truth and justice. You see what I mean? In the same way with women's issues. You and I are going to show up.
Yes.
We don't have to be female to be concerned about truth and justice for our sisters. The same is true with straight, vis-a-vis gays and lesbians.
Absolutely.
It's not just because we love James Baldwin and love Audre Lorde. No, we want our gay and lesbians and trans folk to be understood as folk who have preciousness, dignity, sanctity, and we show up for their movement. We're in solidarity with their movement. And so it's true in terms of what's happening, wherever it is in Gaza, we show up. And it would be true for Jews in Russia. You mistreat our Jewish brothers and sisters in France and Russia and Pittsburgh, we showing up at the synagogue. Treat these Jewish brothers and sisters with dignity. And we say the same thing to the Jewish brothers and sisters in Tel Aviv, vis-a-vis our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza. Treat human beings with dignity. That's exactly what Malcolm said. I'm for truth, no matter who it is. I'm fighting for justice, no matter who it is, because I'm for truth, I'm for justice. That's Malcolm. That's Malcolm. He doesn't get too much deeper than Malcolm. I tell you, especially Malcolm after Mecca. Ooh, Lord have mercy.
Make me want to be a better man, I tell you.
I love your solidarity work, my brother. I love your solidarity work. But for me, It has to do with the primacy of the moral and the spiritual. What kind of human beings are you going to choose to be in terms of the values and virtues that you enact in your mama's womb as you emerge to the tomb waiting for you? And that's a choice that human beings make in terms of the tradition that they want to be a part of. But it must be always linked to a systematic social and historical analysis of power, of structures of domination and oppression. So it's not just individuals and subjects we're talking about, but it's structures and institutions. And that's why the kind of thing that the Poor People's Campaign is doing is so very, very important. I would say the same thing about ecological movements, about movements for womanism, so crucial in terms of critiques of patriarchy as it connects to white supremacy in a capitalist civilization. And see, one of the reasons why I've been so critical of a lot of the young black intellectuals, as you know, Brother Coates and the others, I have a great respect for their voices. I think they're very important voices that we ought to wrestle with. But when they talk about race as if it's not grounded in a fundamental way in predatory capitalist practices and tied to certain policies of the nation state connected to big money and big military, then they soften and distance themselves from the great legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. to say if you're not talking about racism as it connects to poverty, capitalists generating wealth inequality, and militarism around the world, and then the materialism, which is a spiritual and moral issue, if you're not talking about all four of those, then you're missing out. A neoliberal ideology, neoliberal analysis will not in any way talk about how the neoliberal elites or neoliberal voters are viewing Wall Street domination as a taboo issue. They don't want to touch it because Wall Street provides the money for the establishment in the Democratic Party. It provides the resources for the neoliberal wing of the ruling class, but it also provides resources for the neo-fascist wing of the ruling class, given the conflict even within Wall Street itself. Some view themselves as Democratic Party Wall Street people, other Republican Party Wall Street people, but still tied to the same ruling class.
They don't want to mess up the bank. Is the way I see it. They don't want to.
Those interests are deeply entrenched, my brother. Deeply entrenched, very much so.
Last question, Dr. West, if you would allow me.
Sure. I appreciate you taking this time with me, my brother.
Well, it's an honor, sir. Joe Biden has an accuser. Her name is Tara Reid. She harkens back to a time in 1992 to 93 when she worked on the Senate. She worked for him while he was a senator. She was on the staff. She says that a sexual assault took place. Now, we fast forward to this election, and when she came out with the allegations, they weren't taken seriously. In light of Brett Kavanaugh, in light of all of the hoopla made about Trump and his sexual allegations and rape and other things, how can the Democratic Party, with a straight face, brother, ignore allegations against Joe Biden? And if we do look at those, would that give us an opportunity to get Bernie back in the race?
Well, you never know. I tell you, I would be delighted if we got to Milwaukee and realized that what we should have done in 2016, which is run Brother Bernie against the neo-fascists in the White House now, he would have won, rather than the milquetoast neoliberal Hillary herself, who lost very much because of her own limited vision in terms of how you win an election. But if there was a chance of Bernie, I would certainly be supportive of him, but I would still be critical, as you can imagine,
yes,
of some of his policies and so forth. He would just be the better person within the realm of electoral politics. But no, Sister Tell, we've got to allow voices to be heard for them to make their cases when it comes to these kinds of situations of harassment. This is just a matter of justice at this point. It's very much so.
And they went from hashtag Dr. West. They went from hashtag Me Too to hashtag Not You. Everybody but you. And yeah.
Ooh, Lord. Yes, no. But this is real, my brother. This is real. Now you know how dirty and ugly politics really is. Fox News gonna portray almost anybody running against Trump as some kind of moral monster. We have to recognize the ways in which right-wing propaganda operates. But as we know, CNN at its worst, I love my dear brother Anderson Cooper and brother Don and some of the others who've been kind to a number of variety of different voices to be heard. But the dominant orientation of CNN, the dominant orientation of MSNBC across the board has been very much pro-Biden, very much suspicious of Bernie Sanders. And that's been very upsetting to me, that to see the corporate media in its neoliberal forms have that kind of hostility toward Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's a sad thing to see. It shows how market journalism results in the death of high-quality journalism, again, as they're tied to their own paymasters. And it just shows you how vulgar things have become, that you just follow the money these days rather than having people engage in their own independent voice. And again, there's a few exceptions, but not many. But thank God for your show. With your show and the Amy show and Brother Chuck and Ben and a few others, you know, that's about it in the culture, man, because they're trying to eliminate free thinking, critically oriented, compassionate voices on a national level concerned with those in my Christian tradition we call the least of these, the poor, orphans, the widows, the elderly, the children. What about them? They are just as precious as the Wall Street elites, as the Harvard, Yale, Howard, Morehouse graduates coming out of the upper echelons of higher education on their way to bourgeois status.
Has Charlamagne the God, Sway, and others in the hip-hop culture, have they reached out to you to have you on? I don't think I've seen you on those shows.
I don't think so. I don't think. If they have, I go on almost anybody's show. I believe in lifting every voice. That's the anthem of my people and my tradition. We lift every voice, and we engage people, no matter who they are. And so, absolutely. But I don't recall being asked to be on those shows, though.
Well, they need to bring you on since they want to have critical thought and critical conversation about important issues. I just wanted to put that out there and use whatever whatever pull I have, sway I have, in order to make that happen. Maybe we could,
I saw that my dear sister Nina Turner, who I have such great love and respect for, I saw her on that show the other day, and it was a very rich conversation. I mean, Charlamagne, they asked some good questions, very much so.
There you go. Well, Dr. West, thank you once again for taking time out, sir. Please be careful and safe at this critical time. Is there anything you'd like to promote, or is there a book, a live stream? What you got going on, sir?
Well, brother, I'm just celebrating Luther Vandross's birthday from last week.
Wow.
And let us never, ever forget his genius, his witness, and that he's a wave in an ocean of the greatest tradition in the modern world of spiritual fortitude and moral courage, which is the black musical tradition. And we got a major fight going on right now for quality in the black musical tradition that sustains free folk, especially free black folk who straighten their backs up to tell the truth. And when your music gets dumbed down, your soul gets narrowed. And your soul gets narrowed, people don't have to worry about you fighting. You've already surrendered. You've already resigned yourself to a status quo. So we got to keep our musical standards very, very high. So Brother Luther is somebody to keep in mind. I was just talking to my dear brother Bootsy Collins. You know, he and I worked on his last album, Funk Capital of the World. And he's got a new one coming out that we're working on. Oh, Lord, Bootsy, one of our great
yes, he
geniuses,
is.
Man.
I had the album with the glasses.
All the way to J Electrica. I mean, we got some young, young folks. Your X. We got some young folks. Don't forget about Erykah Badu. She's my dear sister.
Of course.
She's been out there telling her own truths. You may not agree with everything. I don't, but Lord have mercy, I love that sister because she's part of the tradition that keeps us going.
Absolutely. Bootsy, I go back with Bootsy. I had the album with the glasses in them. They cut the glasses out of the.
You remember?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
My older brother brought me that album.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Brother, love you, man, and salute you, and you stay strong, and just keep being the force for good you are, my brother, in that tradition of Ida B. Wells Barnett and William Monroe Trotter. Radicals keeping the high levels of truth-telling in the context of media, in the context of intellectual and journalistic engagement with a very grim and bleak moment in the American empire in decay.
Thank you, Dr. West. I appreciate you. Have a great day.
Stay strong, my brother.
You too, sir. Thank you. Well, that was Dr. Cornel West, guys. Phenomenal. Great opportunity to speak with him. And that's it. Follow me at Real Tim Black on Facebook and Twitter, TimBlackTV.com, also Tim Black at Night on Instagram. Wolfpack.